have the honor of introducing our guest speaker today. Some of you know her, and she may be new to some of you, but I'm so excited to be able to either reintroduce her to you in a way that'll help you to get to know her better, or to introduce you to her and her work for the very first time. Naila Francis is a writer, a grief coach, a death midwife, and ordained interfaith minister. She holds space and offers ritual for people at many of life's sacred thresholds, including birth, marriage, death, and other transitional passages. Her work is often informed by her love of poetry, the gifts of healing rooted in nature and community, and her commitment to expanding our grief literacy and death awareness. Naila is the founder of Salt Trails, an interdisciplinary Philadelphia collective making grief shared, public, and visible through community rituals. I get to endeavor with her in that, and it is a pleasure. For many years, Naila worked as a journalist, interviewing prominent artists from all backgrounds. She found her way to the vocations of companioning others through grief and dying after suffering several personal losses in her own life, including the consecutive deaths of a beloved father figure and her father. She considers herself an ardent joy enthusiast, if we could all say that, and brings a compassionate presence and open heart to all she does. I am so honored to pass the mic to Naila Francis.
Thank you so much. Should we try that again? Okay. Thank you so much, Priscilla, for that warm and generous welcoming. Thank you, all of you. It's great to be here with you in my home church, preaching today, which is something I don't even often know. Have I ever been able to say that? So it's wonderful to be here. I'm going to start with a reading. Today's first reading is by one of my favorite poets, Ada Limon, and it's from her. She is, by the way, the new U.S. Poet Laureate, and this poem is from her newest book called The Hurting Kind. Open water. It does no good to trick and weave and lose the other ghosts, to shove the buried deeper into the sandy loam, the riverine silt. Still you come, my faithful one, the sound of a body so persistent in water, I cannot tell if it is a wave or you moving through. A month before you died, you wrote a letter to old friends saying you swam with a pod of dolphins in open water, saying goodbye. But what you told me most about was the eye, that enormous reckoning eye of an unknown fish that passed you during the last-ditch defiant swim. On the shore, you described the fish as nothing you'd seen before, a blue-gray behemoth moving slowly and enduringly through its deep, fathomless North Pacific waters. That night, I heard more about that fish and that eye than anything else. I don't know why it has come to me this morning. Warm rain and landlocked, I don't deserve the image, but I keep thinking how something saw you. Something was bearing witness to you out there in the ocean, where you were no one's mother and no one's wife, but in your original skin. Right before you died, you were beheld, and today, in my kitchen, with you now 10 years gone, I am so happy for you. And our second scripture reading is from Proverbs 2, verses 13 to 22. Happy are you when you find wisdom, when you develop discernment, for she is more profitable than silver and brings yields greater even than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you can conceivably desire can equal her value. She holds long life in one hand, riches and honor in the other. Her paths are pleasant ones, and all her roads lead to peace. She is a tree of life for those who embrace her, and all who hold fast to her find happiness. For it was through her that Yahweh laid the earth's foundation, through her that the heavens were set in place. By God's knowledge and depths were deepened, and clouds dropped down dew. My children, maintain sound wisdom and right judgment, and don't let them out of your sight, for then they'll be the life of your soul, jewels to grace your neck. So when Priscilla invited me to speak this Sunday, she was incredibly kind and generous to offer some possible themes that I could speak to. And as I mused on them and prepared for today, I was absolutely sure that I had the direction I would take. I even had a sense of the talk taking shape in my head. And then I sat down to write, and the whales came, as they have been coming, making their presence known to me again and again this year, which might seem a strange place to begin a sermon titled, When Grief Speaks, Allowing Our Heart's Wisdom to Find Us. But some of you who I'm friends with on social media, or who heard Kip mention the whale videos and poems that I was posting on Facebook earlier this year, might not be surprised that here I am, 5 months after my trip to Baja, Mexico, still talking about the whales. The gray whales, or las ballenas grises, as they're called in Spanish, to be precise. The whales whose eyes I stared into as they stared back at me. The whales whose slick, rubbery skin I petted and scratched and pressed my lips to. Just like the swimmer in Ada Limon's poem, I too felt witnessed by these magnificent creatures, beheld, seen in a purity that felt like being in my original skin. No stories or expectations or roles to play between us, just a meeting of animal body and animal body in a deep wilderness lagoon. The lagoons of Baja California, sir, where I had this experience, are renowned for these types of friendly interactions with the gray whales, who travel almost 13,000 miles round trip every year from their feeding grounds in the Alaskan seas to the warm water lagoons of this peninsula to mate and give birth. For about 4 months, people from all over the world travel to these lagoons to interact with the grays, always on their terms. There is no feeding, there is no baiting, just sitting and waiting in a boat for them to swim up, to be stroked and scratched, and yes, even kissed and hugged. Yet, despite being a whale lover, I knew absolutely nothing about these magical encounters until I stumbled across a video of one such interaction on Instagram last year and immediately decided I had to experience this for myself. Which is how my niece, Josie, and I came to spend 3 days sitting in a small boat, or panga as they're called, earlier this year in the remote town of Guerrero Negro with 4 other travelers from the US in what our expedition guide rightly called whale heaven. For hours every day after driving to Laguna Ojo de Liebre, we were held in thrall by these gentle giants, some of them almost 50 feet long and weighing up to 40 tons. They swam up to the side of our boat to be petted, rolled onto their backs, showing us their bellies like mammoth dogs, lazed on the sides while gazing directly at us with curiosity and something that felt deeper and almost intimate to me, a profound kind of witnessing. One morning, 8 whales surrounded our panga, and I spent long minutes eye to eye with one of these otherworldly beings from my perch at the back of the boat. Sometimes I wonder if that was the moment that undid me, the moment where something vital was transmitted in a language ancient and soundless and as unfathomable as the sea. Or if it were all of it, the countless hours amid misting rainbow spouts and spy hops and casual play with our rapture of crooning endearments and eager hands that brought me the message that my heart needed to hear. Because while this trip was one of the most joyous experiences I've ever had, what awaited me when I came home was unshakable grief. Wave after wave of it that lasted for weeks as I felt rocked to my core by so much that I could not even begin to articulate, which in many ways was okay with me because I'm a grief coach, I'm a death midwife, I hold space for people in life's hard and sorrowing moments all the time, and I am okay with big feelings, theirs and my own. And I'm also okay with not having to know the why of my grief, to simply be with my emotions. But as these disorienting days went on, what I didn't expect was to behold and to hold my own broken heart. Not the heart broken by years of living through a pandemic, an American uprising, war, the erosion of our freedoms and climate catastrophe. That all felt, sadly, very familiar to me. The carrying and processing of all that we've collectively and individually been through in the last 2.5 years. That heartbreak is a companion that moves through and with me that I endeavor to stay present to as much as possible. No, what I encountered in my mornings of waking up weeping, in the moments of feeling a too loud, too fast world permeating the tenderness I walked with, in the opening to what was here for me, was the heart, my heart, that had been fractured 11 years ago. First, with the death of my mom's partner, a father figure to my brother and me, followed the year after by the death of my own father, and the year after that by the collapse of my relationship with the man I thought I would marry. It wasn't that I was grieving those losses anew, for I will always grieve my dad and my mom's partner, Lou. That is the way of grief. We move forward with it, not on from it, learning to carry our losses as part of who we are. What this fresh churning of grief was showing me was the places my heart had been closed because of those losses, protected despite all the grand and generous ways I kept giving it to the world. Visiting an orphanage in Tanzania multiple times, volunteering for hospice, walking alongside the grieving and the dying. But the choice to let love in, to allow my heart to be stirred by someone worthy of it, and invite in the possibility of partnership. That was unsettling, maybe even terrifying. Something I wasn't willing to risk and didn't even know it. And yet, as all those years of losses flooded my heart in the tearful weeks after returning from Baja, what I heard it saying to me was, I am here and I am ready. I want to feel, I want to know that sweet, wild aliveness, to love and to be loved. It seems an unlikely message to carry back from the whales. Impossible, maybe, that they could have nudged my heart this wide open to be steeped not only in grief, but a wisdom that I was ready to receive. And yet, so often, what grief needs to work its alchemy is the witnessing that Ada Limone's swimmer experienced in her poem. But I keep thinking how something saw you, she writes. Something was bearing witness to you out there in the ocean, in your original skin. A bearing witness, not an attempt to fix or solve or distract us from what we're feeling, not a rash of platitudes that speak more to other people's discomfort around grief than what we truly need, not a pull to contort ourselves into some version of who we think we should be or how we think we should act, but to be witnessed, to be held right where we are in our original skins of grief and love and longing. That can be enough for us to hear and receive our heart's truth, for something that's been wanting our attention to surface. And while it is undeniably powerful to share that space of witness with another human, it can be just as powerful to step out into nature and to realize we are never not being witnessed amid the earth's bounty. You know, we may like to think when we're gazing at a flower or marveling at the feathers of a bird, admiring a tree's verdant canopy, that we are taking nature in. But nature is receiving us too, serving as witness and sometimes speaking to us from its own animate soul. Think of when you've gone for a walk in the woods or sat in your garden or by the ocean or maybe met the gaze of a doe or some other creature and felt a shift inside, a sense of being soothed or restored, or maybe an opening where you felt stuck, a gentling where something was rigid, a way to inhabit the rough edges of your life with a little more grace and ease and spaciousness. What message might our broken hearts receive in this type of communion? What might find us here that eludes us in the everyday rhythm of our lives? When I think about my time in Baja and how transformative it was, I believe a part of what worked me so deeply, although I didn't know it was happening at the time, was the invitation to disconnect from my world as I knew it and be present to each moment before me, to be intimately engaged with my natural surroundings, which also brought me out of my head and more fully into my body. But of course, we don't need to be eye to eye with a whale in the middle of nowhere for our hearts to start singing and aching and talking to us. What we can do is to stop trying to avoid or think our way out of our grief, to instead meet it with gentleness, compassion, and curiosity, to drop into our bodies and our hearts, to befriend and make space for our grief so that we can listen for the wisdom, the healing, the awareness that it carries. And I get that that can feel scary and overwhelming sometimes. And if that's what's coming up for you too, I would also like to invite you to consider that sometimes we can also access our grief from a place of joy. For I believe that this too was a catalyst for the unraveling that found me following my time with the Greys. And it's also one of the truths that I hold about grief from my own journey, that our willingness to explore the depths of our grief expands our capacity for joy, just as making more room for joy opens us to be more attuned to our sorrows and the world's. And it was pure joy that impelled my expedition to Baja, an unfettered, ebullient joy that carried me through each day, stared me into each moment, open to untold wonders. When I returned home, I felt more space inside my body, a capaciousness cultivated by the magnanimous presence of the whales, the vastness of the desert and the seascapes that we traveled, the beauty that filled my senses. I had given myself wholly to joy, and so, of course, grief, just as wild and pure, would find me too. And in choosing to stay with it, to soften into its presence, I heard the message my heart needed to hear. I am here and I am ready to love and to be loved. So I'd like to stop here and just invite you into a brief practice for a moment, to just take a little bit of time wherever you are to feel your feet on the floor, to feel yourself supported by the earth beneath you, your sits bones rooted in your seat, to just bring in a sense of groundedness to your body. And then if you feel comfortable doing so, you may close your eyes or gently lower your gaze. And take a deep breath or two, again presencing yourself to that groundedness and feeling of support. And allow yourself to envision a moment of pure joy that you have experienced in your life. And it doesn't have to be anything extravagant, just a moment that comes to mind when you hear the word joy. allow yourself to have that moment again, right now, with all of your senses. To just place yourself there with as much detail as you can summon, from the colors, the scents, the sounds that were present, anything you might have touched or tasted. Just to be with that, receiving those sensations in your body and inhabiting the fullness of that moment. And then I invite you again, as you're comfortable and as is accessible to you, to bring your hand to your heart. And from this space of joy, from this moment of a little more expansiveness, ask yourself, what does my grief need? What does my grief need in this moment? And allow the answer to just rise up. This isn't about efforting or thinking or overthinking. It's simply about being open to receive and trusting that whatever comes to you is absolutely what's meant for you. What does my grief need in this moment? Allowing your heart to speak. And when you have received your answer, maybe give your heart a little rub of thanks or bow your head to your heart. And you can open your eyes and bring your attention gently back to the room that you're in. This is God's good news, and these are his magnificent creatures.